guará, para su guayo, mamá queñao, es un merengueo. Para su guayo, mamá queña, es un merengueo. Ele guará, ele para su guayo, mamá queña, es un merengueo.
Orishas are the deities of the African diaspora. Santeria stems from or comes from the Yoruba nation back in the slave trades. When the Africans were brought to the New World, as they say. I always say New World because it's not that new, and it wasn't new then. When they were enslaved, they could only bring with them in their hearts and in their minds their traditions. So they were taken to Cuba, Brazil, the islands, Jamaica, all of the Caribbean. When they were enslaved, again, as I said, they brought their traditions. So they had to adapt. So they go into the nature and they speak to the nature spirits to find out if they can use certain herbs so that they can create their medicines. Because the Western medicine or the white man's medicine was not going to help them. So the old-fashioned way of plucking herbs and making the medicines, and if you think about it, many of you, your grandmothers, especially if you're coming from the islands, your grandmothers used to pluck herbs. If you had a stomachache, or if you had a toothache, or if you had some kind of pain, your grandmothers would go to the back garden and pick stuff and make all kinds of things, and sometimes it was good, tasted good, sometimes it was awful, but it helped. The word Santeria means veneration or worship or honoring of saints, of spirit. The reason it's called Santeria is because of the church, the influence of the church. They didn't want the Africans to be practicing their savage traditions. So the Africans said, well, okay, we'll follow what you want, but little to the knowledge of the church, the saints of the Catholic Church in particular had certain mysteries or miracles. You know, in order to be a saint, you have to have 3 miracles. So, one of the saints was Saint Barbara, who was a 14th century or 13th century saint. And her miracle, if you will, was her tower where she was imprisoned was struck by lightning. In the Yoruba tradition, Shango is the god of fire, the owner of lightning. So they said, wait a minute. This white saint her miracle is lightning, fire. Ours is Shango. Let's combine them. So hence began the synchronization, to synchronize 2 traditions to one. And it's been like that for over 500 years. I studied public health, my master's degree is in public health, and I worked for 25 years in the field of HIV and AIDS. And living in New York, we saw that there was a need to reach out to the Latino community. Now, the Latino community, the Spanish community, the African American community, always using traditional types of medicine, were left outside of the mainstream. So I decided, or we decided, it wasn't an adventure all on my own, to connect with the priests and priestesses of the community to create an education program to teach people, to teach the priests and priestesses to teach the people, their clients, about HIV and safe sex practices and so on and so forth. From that, I got more into the natural healing, the natural medicine. When you are devastated by a disease and there's no knowledge of how to deal with it, other than the traditional medicines at that time, you know, the medicines that are from the hospitals or the doctors, which I always encourage people to take, but you needed to have something to counteract some of the reactions, because some of those medications, especially back 25 years ago, the side effects were worse than the disease itself. So, you know, sometimes just simple things like mint tea. Again, grandma's version of going to the garden, plucking things, and making a tea to make you feel better, to calm your nerves, to calm the stomach, because a lot of people were having stomach problems. So I invite you to kind of look in some of those books that you probably have collected in your bookshelf on natural medicines or natural herbs. Go to the health food store, pick up some books on those things, and learn about it. Because spirit is connected to all of those little herbs that we have. We go into the forest. Osai is the owner of all of the vegetation. And we speak to him and we sing to him to give us permission to create medicine. Later on, Henri Stephen is going to speak about some of the same things, but he and I have one thing in common. We've worked on one thing in particular, and we just discovered each other, spoke with each other yesterday for the first time. The mind. Psychoses, our brain, trance, understanding what happens to our bodies. I developed a program with one of the hospitals in New York, Lincoln Hospital in the Bronx. Heart straight, and you know, it's kind of like the heartbeat of the Latino community, the Puerto Rican, Dominican, and Cuban communities. And when you have a lot of Latin people, there's a lot of what people say, I'll use the nice word, witchcraft. Some people call it black magic. Is there black magic? I don't know. Is there magic? I don't know. There's healing and there's non-healing. That's what I like to call it. But what happens is people would fall into trances because the energy of spirit is extremely strong. How many here have felt spirit next to them? How many here have felt goosebumps, you know, as you say, kipperfell, for no reason at all? You're in someplace, you know, maybe you're in a spiritual place or something, maybe you go by a Buddhist temple or something and you feel kipperfell all over. That's spirit. Spirit communicates in many different ways. And sometimes people go into a trance. And fall into a trance in the street, you know, you're kind of acting out of the norm. They're going to take you in a straitjacket. They're going to take you to the nearest mental hospital, into a padded room if you're lucky, and lock you up. And a lot of people this was happening to. And the doctors, the psychiatrists, really didn't know much about the traditions of the Caribbean. So, I felt it my duty to teach them. I'm not a psychiatrist, I'm a psychologist, I'm not a psychiatrist. So I don't know medical terms You know, I know paracetamol and that's about it.
Placebo.
Yeah, placebo, exactly. So, we had to develop this program so that people like myself, who we train to go in and just sit with the psychiatrist. We couldn't say anything, you couldn't even sit next to me, you had to sit in the corner and just observe the patient. And if the doctors, you know, the psychiatrists could figure out that there's no reason why this person, it's not schizophrenia, it's not this or it's not this, the other. And I would say, well, it's possible that it's trance-induced. So then I would do an investigation to find out, is this person in a trance or not, or affected by a trance? Because usually the trance goes, but the effects stay behind. Then I would call somebody and say, I'm sending somebody over, they need to be cleansed. They need to be healed. It's not faith healing, it's actually pulling away the negativity of that trance. Now you might say, this is really strange, what's he talking about, trance? Does everybody know what a trance is? Okay. Okay. Anybody who don't know what a trance is?
Trance, possessed of the spirit.
Yeah, it's trance, being possessed or being taken over by an entity, a spirit, and I want to talk about the different deities and their healing properties. Okay. We began with Elegba. Elegba is the communicator. He opens and closes our roads in life. In our tradition, we can't do anything without first honoring him. Because if we don't, you know, he's sometimes childlike. And if you don't give a child that piece of candy in the very beginning, he's going to give you a hard time the rest of the night. So Elegba is kind of, he wants what he wants so that he can send you a message. Because he's the messenger. We pray to him to pray to the other Orishas so that that message can get across for help. So Elegba, in terms of, he takes care of the whole body because he's a messenger. Then we have a very important deity, Orisha, called Ogun. Ogun lives in the forest. He's a never-ending worker. He works 24/7, literally. I'm not going to go into the details why, but he works. He's a loner. He is the master, he is the blacksmith of all of the spiritual world in our tradition. He makes all of the tools, all of the weapons. And what are weapons made of? Steel, iron, knives, guns. He's a warrior. So, what's his healing? His healing is the scalpel that the surgeon uses. Because he's a knife. He's the one that cuts you. The doctor just holds his tool. So again, he takes care of basically the whole body. And you don't want to get him angry. You know, we pray to him when we have to have surgery. Not so much that the surgery goes well, but that the doctor, you know, operates on the right leg or the correct foot. I've learned that when I have to have surgery, I mark X the spot.